Today's story isn't just about politics or hospitals, it's about courage. It's about one woman who walked into a system built on silence and refused to stay quiet. If you've ever wondered what real leadership looks like when the cameras aren't rolling, stay with us. This one's for those who've lived long enough to know that justice doesn't always come easy, but it's worth the fight when someone's brave enough to stand up. The grand lobby of Redwood Medical Center glowed under harsh white lights. Marble floors reflected the flashes of press cameras, and banners proclaiming "Healthcare for All" fluttered gently in the controlled air. The crowd was a mix of donors in tailored suits, local officials, hospital executives, and a handful of nervous staffers lingering near the edges. All eyes were fixed on the stage. Behind the podium, Dr. Adrian Voigt, silver-haired, smooth-tongued, polished like a broadcast anchor, leaned forward to speak, his voice wrapping the room in confident rhetoric. Today, he declared, we reaffirm our commitment to equality in healthcare, driven not by politics, but by compassion. Applause followed. A few cameras panned right to Karoline Leavitt, White House press secretary, standing quietly by the curtain's edge, her expression unreadable. She wore a navy blazer, white blouse, hair pulled back in a firm knot, a thin earpiece tucked behind her right ear. But her hands were not idle. One thumb hovered over her phone screen. As the applause faded, she stepped forward, uninvited, onto the stage. "Dr. Voigt," she said, calmly but clearly, "you lied to the donors." The room stilled. Voigt blinked, then smiled. "Excuse me?" "You stood here before the press and your investors," Karoline said, voice sharpening like a chisel, "and claimed this hospital was a beacon of transparency. You said every dollar went to the patients. But I've seen the files, doctor. The $500,000, 0 cents. The $300, 0 cents. Offshore transfer. The shell company in the Caymans." A ripple of whispers swept through the room. Cameras pivoted. Voigt's smile faltered, just for a moment. "This is political theater." Karoline held up her phone. "Would you like me to play the recording? Your voice, just 2 days ago? She'll never find the paper trail. Find who leaked it now." Gasps. One of the donors, a woman in a burgundy pantsuit, took a sharp step back. A man near the front whispered, "Is she serious?" Karoline didn't flinch. "This isn't about party lines, it's about the patients in your East Wing, where machines fail and elderly veterans sit in silence while donors fund rooftop gardens and media rooms." Voigt reached for the mic, but Karoline beat him to it. "The American people deserve to know," she said, steady as steel. "Your so-called progressivism is a mask. You didn't just steal from a fund, you stole from trust. From every working man who gave $20 thinking he was helping someone breathe easier." The silence was thick. Then, slowly, one voice, an older man in the back, said, "Play the tape." Others echoed him. Karoline locked eyes with Voigt, her voice low but cutting. "You want to talk about politics? Fine. But first, let's talk about the truth." And then, click. She hit play. The room would never be the same again. 3 days earlier, the call had come not from a press aide but from the president himself. "Karoline," he said, his voice brisk over the secure line, "you're going to California, Redwood Medical Center." She'd heard the name before, a crown jewel of progressive healthcare in San Francisco, a place often spotlighted by the media as the future of medicine. What most didn't see was the billions in federal grants funneled quietly into its programs. No audits, no questions, until now. "We're announcing a new oversight policy on federal health grants," the president continued. "You're running point." Karoline sat upright in her White House office, pen tapping against a legal pad. She knew this wouldn't be a simple press event. The administration's decision to shine a light on public health care spending had already rattled cages, and Redwood was the biggest of them all. "Yes, sir," she replied. He paused. "They won't welcome you, Karoline, but you're not going there to be liked. You're going to make sure the truth gets through." That truth would land her in the middle of a polished, politically charged hospital system run like a corporation, guarded by PR operatives and inflated egos. The next morning, she boarded a flight to San Francisco alone. Her husband Nicholas would meet her later. He had business in the area, but for now, it was just her, a government-issued tablet full of briefing notes, and a growing sense that something was off. When she arrived, the hospital greeted her with the kind of professionalism that felt a little too smooth. A staffer named Marcus Delroy, communications director, escorted her through the marble lobby. "We've arranged the podium setup, audio check at 4 p.m. and pre-event interviews with local affiliates, all very routine," he said, smiling tight. Karoline nodded, eyes scanning everything, the art on the walls, the donor plaques, the perfectly staged waiting areas. It was a show, and shows, she'd learned, usually meant something was being hidden. They reached the media room where she would prepare remarks, but just before the door closed behind her, she noticed something out of place. An elderly man in a janitor's uniform slowly cleaning near the east corridor. His mop dragged past a locked double door labeled "Patient Overflow, Restricted." The lock had been reinforced with a chain. Odd, she thought. Back in the room, she opened her laptop and reviewed her notes. On paper, everything seemed fine. Balanced books, impressive outcomes, award-winning innovation. But Karoline had spent years surviving Washington's spin. She trusted instinct more than spreadsheets. Outside the window, the spires of downtown San Francisco shimmered in the morning haze. She took a breath, opened a blank notepad, and wrote one sentence: "Don't trust the welcome." In 3 days, she would burn that entire welcome to the ground. He walked into the conference suite like he owned the building, and maybe he did. Dr. Adrian Voigt, Chief Innovation Officer of Redwood Medical Center, wore a tailored slate-gray suit under his white coat. No tie, no ID badge. He didn't need one. His face had been on the cover of The Atlantic, quoted in Politico, profiled on MSNBC. A doctor, yes, but also a darling of Silicon Valley's elite. Known for merging AI diagnostics with progressive healthcare ideals, Voigt had become the unofficial spokesman for what the media called the future of medicine. Karoline stood as he entered. Voigt barely looked at her before turning toward the staffer behind him. "Let's keep this quick," he muttered. "I've got a panel live stream in 20..." Then his eyes found hers. "You must be Karoline Leavitt," he said, his voice smooth, practiced, like a surgeon used to talking over an anesthetized patient. The White House's comms warrior. Karoline extended a hand. "I'm here to ensure the president's policy announcement is clear, accurate, and uninterrupted." Voigt smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Ah yes, the audit initiative, because nothing says efficiency like DC poking around in hospitals from 3,000 miles away." She kept her voice even. "Transparency shouldn't be regional, Doctor." He moved past her, walking the room as if testing its boundaries. "You know, your boss has made quite a name for himself attacking institutions like this one, places that actually get results. But I suppose when you can't build anything new, it's easier to tear down what already works." Karoline watched him closely, measuring every word, every calculated insult cloaked in civility. "We're not here to tear down anything," she said. "We're here to make sure federal funds meant for patient care aren't being rerouted into media rooms or marketing campaigns." That landed. Voigt's smile twitched. "Interesting," he said. "So, you're not just a mouthpiece. You're here to judge our spending habits too?" "I'm here," she replied, stepping slightly forward, "to ensure the public is told the truth." Silence fell for half a beat. Voigt walked to the window, looking out over the donor courtyard. "You know, Ms. Leavitt, I've seen many like you come and go. Fire in the eyes, mission in hand, always convinced they're the first to care about integrity. But this is a hospital, not a campaign stop. You don't belong here." Karoline didn't blink. "We'll see." They stood across from each other, two professionals dressed in civility but armored in ideology, one representing legacy systems of power cloaked in progressivism, the other a blunt force of clarity trained in Washington's fire. Outside the room, staffers moved briskly, pretending not to listen. Inside, the air felt colder. Voigt checked his watch. "I'm late for my panel." "Don't worry, we'll make sure your little press event goes smoothly." He moved to the door, then paused. "Oh, and Miss Leavitt, do remember where you are. This city tends to chew up outsiders." She let him leave without a word, but inside, the fight had already begun. It started with a hallway that didn't belong on the brochure, while the main hospital gleamed like a Silicon Valley showroom, glass walls, greenery, silent elevators. Karoline Leavitt found herself pulled toward a quieter wing on the east side, where the air smelled faintly of bleach and old paint. Her press team had scattered to coordinate camera placements for the president's upcoming event, giving her rare breathing room. She took it not to rest, but to observe. She passed a half-lit corridor marked patient overflow, staff only. No security, just a dull keycard lock and a janitor cart left idle nearby. She didn't need access. The small window in the door told her enough. Inside, chipped linoleum floors, cracked ceiling tiles, a few rows of aging hospital beds, and patients. Elderly men with oxygen masks. A veteran with a folded blanket across his lap, staring blankly at the floor. No flowers, no family, no dignity. Karoline stepped back, heart tightening. This was not what Redwood advertised. "Miss Leavitt?" The voice startled her. A young woman, mid-20s, blonde hair tied high, eyes darting nervously, stood behind her, half emerging from a nearby break room. "I'm Eliza Park," the woman whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Patient services, data entry. I saw you in the press area yesterday. Can I talk to you?" Karoline nodded. "Not here." They slipped into a side office and closed the door. Eliza pulled a crumpled sheet from her coat pocket, a printed spreadsheet. "These numbers don't match," she said. "Charity funds marked allocated, but they never actually get distributed. I checked patient billing records. There's money missing." "How much?" Karoline asked. "Hundreds of thousands. And that's just what I can trace," Eliza said, voice trembling. "It's being funneled into something called an auxiliary infrastructure reserve. It's not even part of our care system." Karoline scanned the paper. The amounts weren't just off, they were deliberate. Rounded to just under thresholds that would trigger automated audits. "Does anyone else know?" she asked. Eliza hesitated. "Dr. Voigt controls everything. I tried to ask once, got pulled into HR and told I was misunderstanding the system. My access was limited after that, so I stopped. Until now." Karoline leaned in, lowering her voice. "Why are you coming to me?" Eliza's eyes shimmered, not with tears, but fear. "Because you're not from here. You're the only one they can't fire." The words hit Karoline like a weight. She reached into her blazer, pulled out a notepad and scribbled a number. "This is a secure line to my White House team. If you find anything else, documents, transfers, internal memos, send it. But do not use hospital Wi-Fi. And, Eliza, don't talk to anyone." Eliza nodded quickly, tucking the paper away. As Karoline stepped back into the hallway, the door to the patient overflow wing remained closed. But now it wasn't just a neglected part of the building. It was a crime scene. And she had just found her first witness. The folder wasn't marked confidential. That would have been too obvious. Instead, it sat innocently on a forgotten desk in a dim administrative side office labeled Infrastructure Allocations, wedged between outdated invoices and dusty financial logs. The overhead light flickered as Karoline Leavitt stepped inside. The door left ajar after a distracted clerk exited in a rush. She moved fast but deliberately, as she had done 100 times on campaign trails where stakes were life-size and minutes mattered. Her eyes locked onto the label, Auxiliary Infrastructure Reserve, Q1 Transfers. Heart-quickening, she flipped the folder open. Inside were 5 sheets. The first listed line item expenses, HVAC system upgrades, digital signage, a rejuvenation suite for executive staff. Normal enough. Until she reached page 3. Transfer authorization. Amount, $500,000, 0 cents. Destination, Redwood Operations Reserve, LLC. Authorization, A. Voigt. There it was, his signature, fluid, confident, unmistakable. Beneath it a scrawled note, move to reserve per secondary project designation, no board notice required. Karoline snapped photos of every page with her encrypted White House device. Her fingers moved fast like she was racing against breath. This wasn't rumor, it wasn't politics. This was a trail. Detailed, dated, and damning. She was sliding the folder back into place when she heard the voice. "Well now, I was wondering when we'd cross paths again." Marcus Delroy, Redwood's communications director, leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed, smile polite but tight. "Didn't think you'd be poking around admin files, Ms. Leavitt. That's not in the press packet." Karoline straightened, her phone already back in her pocket. "I was looking for the podium layout document. The staffer said this was storage." Delroy chuckled. "Of course. Must have made a wrong turn into a locked finance room." His tone was light, but his eyes weren't. They studied her like a man trying to gauge whether to bluff, intimidate, or escalate. "I've worked in politics too," he said casually, stepping inside. "Communications for 2 senators, 1 governor. You know what I learned?" Karoline didn't answer. "That sometimes it's not about what you find, it's about what you don't say." He tilted his head. "You don't really want to light a fire here, do you?" Karoline met his gaze, unmoving. "If there's a fire, Mr. Delroy, I'm not the one who started it." The silence between them stretched. Somewhere in the distance a machine beeped. Footsteps passed, but inside the room the temperature dropped. Delroy took a slow step back. "I'll pretend I didn't see you here, for now. But you might want to tread carefully. This place may be polished, but the floor's still slick." He left without another word. Karoline waited a full minute before exhaling. Outside the office, she slipped into a side stairwell and checked her phone again. Photos saved, encrypted, sent to a secure White House account with the tag Voight Transfer Initial Proof. She didn't know what Voight's next move would be, but hers had just lit the match. The email came through just after noon. "Urgent, Dr. Voight requests script changes for the president's remarks. Meet in press room C." Karoline read it twice. The timing was too perfect. President Trump's visit was hours away and the press logistics were already finalized. Last-minute script revisions from a hospital official, especially one not on the communications chain, wasn't just odd. It was a setup. She stood quietly at the back of the event floor as tech crews tested microphones and angled floodlights over the podium. A soft vibration buzzed in her ear from the comms team. "Secondary mic was found off-center. Looks patched in manually," one agent said. "Doesn't match our tech specs." Karoline's eyes narrowed. "Trace the wiring," she said. "Now." Within minutes they found it. Tucked behind the primary podium mic was a small, unregistered audio relay, a recording device, disguised as a standard backup. Its signal fed into a private network, an internal loop, not White House secured. Someone wasn't just planning to film her, they wanted to capture, isolate, and edit her words. She didn't need to guess who. Down the corridor through the glass doors of the hospital boardroom, she caught a glimpse of Dr. Adrian Voight laughing with a cluster of local journalists. Elbow taps, low whispers. Karoline recognized the pattern. It wasn't press coordination, it was narrative planting. He was setting the stage, and she was meant to be the spectacle. Karoline stepped away from the main floor, slipping into a quiet break room to regroup. She didn't panic. She didn't raise alarms. Instead, she pulled out her tablet and began refining her own contingency remarks. Calm, clear, irrefutable. If Voight wanted a press brawl, he'd get a chess match. Moments later, Marcus Delroy reappeared at her door, knocking lightly. "Everything all right?" he asked, with a grin too polished to be sincere. "Dr. Voight mentioned you might want to review the speaker flow. Said you were concerned about pacing." Karoline looked up from her screen, expression cool. "No need, the pacing's perfect." Delroy hesitated. Just enough to confirm she was off script, then he nodded. "Well, good. I'll let him know." As he turned to leave, Karoline spoke again. "Tell him one more thing." Delroy stopped. "Tell him the microphones are just fine, no need to tinker with truth." Their eyes met. No smiles this time. Back on the event floor, Karoline walked slowly to the podium, placing her hand lightly on the mic. Her team had disabled the rogue device, but she left it there, visible, like a reminder. Let him think the trap was still set. That way, when it sprang, she'd be the one holding the wire. The hotel room wasn't much, just a clean corner suite overlooking downtown San Francisco, but it felt like sanctuary, for a few hours, at least. Karoline Leavitt stood by the window, arms folded, eyes tracing the skyline beyond the fog. In just under 12 hours, she'd face a crowd of reporters, donors, and one of the most influential liberal healthcare figures in America, and every word she spoke would be dissected by cameras that didn't care about facts, only sound bites. Behind her, the door clicked open. She didn't turn. "I picked up dinner," said a calm voice. Nicholas Riccio entered with 2 paper bags and that familiar look in his eyes, half concern, half unshakable belief. No tie, jacket folded over one arm. A man used to boardrooms, not war zones, but still able to read the battlefield. She turned finally, exhaustion in her posture but not defeat. "You should be out of this," she said quietly. "They're gonna come after me hard tomorrow, and probably you too." Riccio placed the bags on the table and crossed the room to her. "Karoline," he said, voice low, "if I wanted comfort, I wouldn't have married the only woman in Washington who argues better than lawyers and doesn't blink under fire." She allowed a half smile. "They'll say I made it political, that I'm staging some vendetta against Voight. They'll spin everything." "Let them spin," he said. "You're holding the truth." He sat on the couch and pulled out his phone. "I wasn't going to tell you until after the event, but I think you should know. I've got a stake in Redwood's parent group, small but enough to matter, and I got an email this morning from one of the board's finance partners. They're worried. Someone internally flagged a transfer last quarter. Looks like Voight's been using shell reserves." Karoline turned from the window, tension rising. "You knew?" "I suspected," he said, his voice steady, "but now I know, and more importantly, they know I know. If you need pressure from above, I can call the other shareholders, put the heat on Voight from inside." She sat down beside him, letting the weight settle for a breath. "This wasn't supposed to be a takedown," she said. "It was just a routine appearance, a podium, a speech. Then I walked into something rotten. That's what happens when you walk with your eyes open," Riccio said. He rested a hand on hers. "You saw something everyone else ignored. You didn't flinch. That's not politics. That's character." A beat passed between them. Then Karoline's phone buzzed. She picked it up. A text from a blocked number. "Stop digging or disappear." She showed it to Riccio. He didn't blink. "He's scared. That means you're close." Karoline stared at the screen for a long moment before locking the phone and setting it down. "You know what the problem is with men like Voight?" she asked. Riccio raised an eyebrow. "They think because I wear heels and not a stethoscope, I'll back down. But I've handled media mobs, campaign war rooms, and hostile press corps on 2 hours of sleep. He has no idea who he's dealing with." Riccio smiled. "I do." She leaned back, her mind already sharpening. Tomorrow she'd walk into Voight's house of mirrors and bring it down brick by brick. It was still dark when Karoline Leavitt slipped out of the hotel, coat collar up against the San Francisco chill, her footsteps echoing in the quiet. The city had not yet stirred, but she had already received the message. 6:00 a.m. East parking lot. Come alone. She did. Eliza Parks stood in the shadows beside a supply truck, her frame small, shoulders hunched under a thin hoodie. But her eyes, nervous and sharp, met Karoline's with quiet resolve. She wasn't just scared, she was ready. "I got it," she whispered, holding out a plain manila envelope. Karoline took it, flipping through the documents under the street lamp's flickering glow. Bank records, transfer statements, internal memos. Then, the bombshell. $300,000 0 cents transferred to an offshore account under the alias Redwood Global Development, authorized by A. Voight. Attached was a scanned note. Project Fallback. No media disclosure. "I pulled these from the finance office," Eliza said, voice tight. "Voight's people are sniffing around. They know someone leaked the first set. I couldn't get everything, but I got enough. If he finds out it was me..." Her voice broke off. Karoline looked at her, really looked. This wasn't a political operative or a seasoned staffer. Eliza was a 26-year-old analyst with a mountain of debt and a mother in hospice care. She hadn't come forward because it was safe. She came forward because it was right. "You're braver than half the people I've worked with in D.C., Karoline said, "and smarter than most of them, too." Eliza gave a small, sad smile. "I just want to work at a hospital that helps people, not one that steals in the name of progress." Karoline tucked the documents inside her coat. "Go back inside. Act like nothing happened. If anyone asks, deny everything, but if you feel watched or threatened, call the number I gave you. They'll get you out." Eliza hesitated. "Do you really think this will make a difference?" Karoline met her eyes. "It already has." They parted quickly. Eliza vanished behind the loading docks like a ghost. Back in the hotel, Karoline scanned and encrypted the documents, sending them to the White House legal team with the subject line, "Voight, offshore account confirmed, evidence attached, urgent verification." The response was immediate. "Data verified, account is active, shell company confirmed, keep secure until press clearance." Karoline exhaled slowly, the weight of proof, now a burning fuse in her pocket. She sat at the small table by the window, city lights just beginning to blink to life, and texted her husband. "We have him, $300.00 K, offshore, all verified, keep your phone on." He responded with one word: ready. As the sky shifted from gray to gold, Karoline wasn't thinking about podiums or talking points. She was thinking about a girl with a folder and a choice. Eliza had chosen right. And because she had, the storm that would break that afternoon wouldn't just be political. It would be personal. By mid-morning, the hospital lobby buzzed with rehearsals and camera checks, but Karoline Leavitt wasn't watching the press team. She was watching the shadows. Her instincts told her something was off. Not the scheduled chaos of a presidential visit, but something more surgical. Eyes that lingered too long, staffers who whispered and disappeared. She moved through the crowd slowly, calculating, scanning every detail like a soldier walking point. Near the tech platform she saw him, Tobias King, head of private security, former military contractor turned corporate enforcer. He wasn't dressed like the others. No ID lanyard, no headset, just a black jacket, a stiff posture, and a small black box tucked under his arm. "What's in the box?" she asked coolly as she approached. King froze for half a second, then smiled. "Backup batteries. For the press mics." "Press mics are wired to internal power," she replied. "I approved the diagram myself." King's smile faltered. He muttered something and moved off, disappearing down a hallway. Karoline didn't follow. She didn't need to. Minutes later, she was back at the podium, examining every inch. And there it was. Taped beneath the lectern, barely visible, a second recording device, not connected to hospital tech, not cleared by White House staff. She traced the wire up the inside of the frame to a palm-sized transmitter blinking faintly. Private frequency. Voight had doubled down. This wasn't just surveillance, it was a trap. Capture Karoline's words, twist them in post-edit, leak the footage to media allies, and frame her as an opportunist hijacking healthcare for political gain. But Voight had miscalculated. She didn't disable the device. She didn't rip it out. Instead, she leaned into it literally, placing her notes directly beside it, a show of indifference. Let them listen. She left the podium and walked briskly to her team. "We've been wired," she said. "Hidden transmitter under the mic. Don't remove it. I want them thinking they're in control." A few aides exchanged glances. "Watch the perimeter. King is moving solo. No comms. I want eyes on him and every hallway he enters." Then she returned to her laptop, opening the secure folder marked Voight Docs Verified, triple-checking that every file, every memo, every transfer slip was uploaded, encrypted, and backed up off-site. She typed a message to the press team. "Prepare contingency video package, mark as Redwood timeline, not for release unless signal is given." Her finger hovered over the send key. She looked once more toward the crowd of suits and cameras. Voight thought he was setting the ambush, but Karoline knew better. She was the bait, and the wire he planted would hang him. The lobby of Redwood Medical Center had transformed into a stage. In-rows of chairs stretched from the podium to the glass entrance. Donors in tailored suits sipped coffee. Staffers in blue scrubs lined the back wall, and cameras from 3 national outlets aimed like sniper rifles at the podium. A banner hung overhead, Federal Private Healthcare Collaboration, a new chapter. But behind the smiles and sound checks, the air buzzed with static. Something unspoken, charged. Dr. Adrian Voight was the first to seize the spotlight. He strode to the mic, adjusting it with the confidence of a man used to applause. "Before the president arrives," he said, voice amplified, "I'd like to thank the community, our donors, and the media for supporting Redwood's mission: progress, compassion, and equality in care." Karoline stood off stage, eyes steady. Voight smiled at the audience. "Sadly, not everyone respects that mission. This week, certain government figures have come here with suspicion instead of support. They question our integrity, they spread rumors, and they do it not for the patients, but for politics." His eyes slid to Karoline like a blade. "Ms. Leavitt represents an administration that has never believed in our model, and now she's here to discredit it," with innuendo. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few reporters leaned forward, ready to pounce. Karoline stepped into the light. She didn't wait for the applause or the silence. She walked directly to the podium, stood next to Voight, and took the spare mic. "Thank you, Dr. Voight," she said calmly. "Since you've opened the door, let's walk through it." He stiffened. She turned to the crowd. "I wasn't going to say this today. I came to oversee a press event, not a scandal. But when public money disappears, when patients are denied while rooftop gardens are built, and when staff are silenced, we don't have the luxury of staying quiet." She raised her phone and tapped the screen. The giant monitor behind her lit up. A bank transfer receipt. $500,000, 0 cents. Destination: Redwood Operations Reserve, LLC. Voight's name was stamped at the bottom. A pause. Then another slide appeared, $300, 0 cents. To Redwood Global Development, routed through an offshore account in the Caymans. Again, authorized by A. Voight. Karoline's voice stayed even. These funds were earmarked for low inpatient patient support. They were diverted, without board oversight, without transparency. Gasps. A woman in the front row, the major donor Evelyn Travers, stood abruptly. "Is this real?" Karoline nodded. "Verified by a federal forensic team and recorded in Dr. Voight's own voice." She played the audio, Voight's tense whisper. "She'll never find the paper trail. Find who leaked it now." The silence cracked open. Reporters shouted questions. Flashbulbs lit up like fireworks. Voight turned crimson, mouth opening, but no sound came. Karoline leaned into the mic. "If this is political, why is he afraid of the evidence?" Voight lunged for the podium. "This is a smear campaign, fabricated." Karoline didn't flinch. "We're releasing the documents to the public, to every outlet, regardless of bias. Let the facts speak." Evelyn Travers turned away from Voight. "You said every dollar helped patients." "And I believed it," Karoline said, locking eyes with her. "Until I saw the overflow ward. Until I met the whistleblower." Reporters shouted again. "Who's the source? Will there be an audit?" But Karoline's gaze stayed locked on Voight. He stepped back, unsteady, and in that moment his empire cracked, not with a bang, but with a shift. The donors stopped clapping, the staff stopped nodding, and the man who once owned the room now looked like he didn't belong in it. Karoline turned to the crowd, her final words clear and firm. "This isn't about parties, it's about the people no one sees, and it ends today." The crowd didn't erupt. It rose, slowly, tensely, as if realizing they had been part of a lie. And Voight, he was still standing. But the ground beneath him was gone. The moment the screens went dark, the real collapse began. Within minutes of Karoline stepping off the podium, Voight's world unraveled. The room buzzed with outrage, not the scripted applause of hospital galas, but raw disbelief. Donors whispered urgently among themselves. Evelyn Travers, her jaw set like stone, walked past Voight without a glance and straight to her assistant. "Pull our funding," she said, immediately. Karoline didn't gloat, she simply stepped aside, allowing the storm she had triggered to do what it was built to do: burn through the rot. Reporters swarmed. "Dr. Voight, do you deny the transfers? Are there more shell companies? Will you resign?" Voight tried to speak, but every sentence cracked under pressure. His voice, once smooth and commanding, now stammered. "This is a smear. It's politics, not truth." But no one was listening. Across the lobby, Nicholas Riccio moved with quiet efficiency, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes," he told his contact at the Redwood Parent Investment Group. "You saw the footage. We're out. Pull our capital exposure. Voight's toxic now." He glanced at Karoline, gave a single nod. The financial kill shot had been delivered. Security stepped in to hold the perimeter. Staffers who once parroted Voight's ideals now backed away, eyes cast down. One of them muttered, "I didn't know," but Karoline had heard that line before. In Washington, in boardrooms, in press pits, they always know, they just never speak, until someone else does. Karoline turned to her aide. "Release everything. Press packet, scan documents, timestamps. Let them verify it for themselves." The aide hesitated. "What about the whistleblower?" Karoline's voice dropped. "Already protected. Let Voight burn, not her." At that moment, Eliza Park sat in a security-monitored office 2 floors up, sipping water, hands trembling but safe. She had done her part, and now, thanks to layers of federal protection, she would not be the scapegoat Voight needed. Back on the ground floor, a ripple swept through the hospital's staff. Phones buzzed, screens updated. A CNBC alert popped up on a donor's tablet. Redwood parent stock plummets 18% after whistleblower exposure. It was happening in real time. Voight finally turned to Karoline, eyes hollow with disbelief. You planned this. From the beginning." She looked him, dead in the eye. "No, you did. I just gave the truth a microphone." Then she walked away, calm, shoulders squared, not to applause, but to consequence. In a city built on image and illusion, Karoline had done what few dared: shatter the mirror. The first domino had fallen, and there would be more. By evening, the headlines had splintered like shrapnel. Press secretary hijacks hospital event for political stunt, CNN, hero or hacker. Karoline Leavitt's bold accusation shakes Bay Area. Fox. Voight framed? Sources say White House sought scandal, Politico, inside her hotel room. Karoline Leavitt sat on the edge of the bed, still in the same navy blazer she'd worn that morning. The adrenaline had faded. In its place was something colder, not regret, reality. The truth had landed, but so had the blowback. Her phone pinged constantly, congressional aides wanting statements, conservative anchors requesting interviews, progressive activists demanding retractions. Twitter was on fire. Hashtags trended, Leavitt exposes on one side, Voight framed on the other. She silenced the device and looked out the window, the fog rolling in over San Francisco like a curtain being drawn after a final act. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Across the room, Nicholas Riccio watched her quietly. He knew this look. He'd seen it after every brutal press scrum, every campaign ambush, every televised character assassination. It was the look of someone who won the fight, but not the room. "They'll twist it," she said finally. "Say I exploited a whistleblower, that I timed it to hurt the president's critics, that it was all scripted." Nicholas walked over, placed a hand on her shoulder. "Doesn't matter, you didn't do this for them." Karoline nodded slowly. "But they'll come after Eliza, after me. They'll keep spinning." "And you'll keep walking," he said. "Because the truth's not a headline, it's a ledger, and Voight's name is all over it." She smiled faintly. "Not out of pride, out of resolve." A soft knock came at the door. Her aide stepped in, eyes wide. "Voight's officially suspended. The board announced it 5 minutes ago. Donors are withdrawing, staff are leaking statements, the whole thing's coming down." Karoline stood up, straightened her collar. "Good. But protect the nurse. Move her off-site, quietly." The aide nodded and left. Karoline opened her laptop. A new email waited from Eliza, short, to the point. "I kept my job. The new administrator says things will change. Thank you." She stared at the message for a long time, then typed 2 words, "Stay brave." Outside, protesters gathered, some with signs defending Voight, others calling for a full investigation. News vans circled. The circus had begun. Karoline stepped back from the window. She didn't fear the noise. She feared the silence that came after. When the system, embarrassed, would try to bury the shame, rewrite the facts, and move on. That was the real danger. Not losing headlines, but losing memory. And that she would not allow. Tomorrow the media would spin, but tonight, Karoline Leavitt had one thing no reporter, no donor, no PR machine could fake. She had the truth. And in Washington, that was rarer than gold. The city lights of Washington flickered beneath a gray dawn as Karoline Leavitt sat alone in her West Wing office, her blazer draped over the back of her chair, sleeves rolled, tie pin laid on the desk like a relic from another life. Her phone was silent now. The storm had passed, at least on the surface. The fallout from Redwood was still unfolding. Dr. Adrian Voigt had officially resigned. 2 board members followed. Investigations had been launched. Congressional hearings were rumored. And though the headlines were cooling, the trenches were shifting. Inside backrooms and newsrooms, narratives were being rethreaded. Some painted Karoline as a crusader, others as a disruptor who broke ranks to embarrass a public institution. But none of them saw the weight that sat in her chest now. She opened her laptop, scrolled past a dozen headlines and found the one that mattered most. Redwood Hospital reforms patient access policy. Low-income wing receives $1.20 in new funding. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling through her nose. That wasn't victory, that was impact. A knock on the door pulled her back. It was a White House aide. "Press wants a quote on Redwood. They're asking if you're going to pursue a full federal audit." Karoline looked up, her voice even. "Not yet. Let the dust settle. Then we'll decide what matters most, optics or outcome." The aide nodded and left. She turned to the window again. A year ago, she'd have framed this as a win. She would have stood at the podium, delivered the message, and walked away. But something about Eliza, about the silence in that overflow ward, had changed her. It reminded her that truth wasn't always strategic. Sometimes it was just necessary. Her phone buzzed. Nicholas Riccio, her husband. The text was short, they're rattled. "But they're watching you now, proud of you." She smiled, just barely, and replied, "Good. Let them watch." Because this wasn't just a press win, it was a warning. To every administrator who thought the numbers wouldn't be questioned. To every PR handler who assumed whistleblowers could be buried. To every power broker who thought truth only mattered when it was convenient. Karoline stood, walked to the doorway of her office, and looked down the long marble hallway. There would be other stories. Other Voights, other systems too big to fail. But she'd proven one thing: they could be shaken. And sometimes all it took was one woman with a folder, a camera, and a spine. She walked back inside, closed her laptop, and whispered under her breath, "We're just getting started." The story of Karoline Leavitt at Redwood Medical Center teaches us that truth doesn't rise by accident. It's carried by the few willing to risk everything to lift it. In a system polished with PR and power, where silence is rewarded and exposure punished, one person's courage can be the catalyst that topples a lie. Karoline didn't come looking for a scandal. She came to do her job. But when she saw the cracks, missing money, manipulated narratives, and voices buried in fear, she chose the harder path: to stand, speak, and expose. Her journey reminds us that integrity isn't about winning headlines, it's about doing what's right when no one's clapping. It's the janitor who nods quietly, the nurse who risks her job, the husband who doesn't flinch when the world turns. The truth always has a cost, but silence costs more. In a world where institutions often protect themselves first, the lesson is clear. Leadership isn't about position, it's about principle. And sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one with the microphone. It's the one who won't look away. Because when someone finally tells the truth, loud enough, clear enough, it shakes even the walls built to contain it.